Hey everybody, this is Dan at Ready Edge Go. Welcome to Go Live, and today got a really cool, super awesome human being as a guest, and it's going to be Raj. Raj is one of my former students and is now going to UC Santa Barbara amidst this crazy COVIDness. But before we get into it, if you want to make high school life easier, if you want to learn more about how college and the whole game actually works, definitely like and subscribe. Follow us, and we'll be putting out good content every week. And I think we've actually been putting out content like every day. And so I don't like to waste time. Without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to talk about what it's like at UC, life at a UC right now, UC Santa Barbara being really well known for campus life. But, I'd be really curious to see how COVID has affected that. And we'll be spending the second half of today talking about the PIQs, because before you can even get to UCS Santa Barbara, well, let's get you there. You got to write these essays. And whether you are a senior or an underclassman or a transfer student, right, you have to write those as well. This should provide somewhat insightful to how to get in. So what's up, Raj? How you doing?
I'm doing good, Dan. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm super excited.
Thank you, man. Thanks for your time. It has been a while, and I have a surprise for you actually before we get started here.
Yeah.
I'm drinking a kind of coffee. Can you guess what coffee that is?
Pete's coffee, man. That's the best coffee around. That's the one thing I miss. We don't have as much Pete's coffee here in SoCal.
Oh yeah. So you're in Santa Barbara right now.
Right. I am in Isla Vista, which is the town right next to UC Santa Barbara.
Well, you don't have to be polite about it. Isla Vista, for everyone who doesn't know, is nicknamed IV, and
yes,
it's known as the party central, at least of UC Santa Barbara's past life. But I'd argue it's been toned down like tenfold since about 3, 4, 5 years ago or something like that. So that's awesome.
Right. I would agree with you. I think UCSB, a lot of times it gets a bad rap for being a party school and this and that. But we have some great programs, and there is a social scene, but there's a place to get your work done, and there's a place to have fun, which is what I really love.
Which is true about everything. But hey, tell us a bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where are you studying? I mean, just what's your favorite food? I don't know, whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm from Fremont, California. I went to Washington High School, and I recently graduated. I graduated in 2019. And I'm studying mechanical engineering here at UCSB. But some stuff I like to do outside of school is just, go hiking, enjoy nature, build stuff. So, yeah, that's pretty much it, man. That's a little bit about me.
Where did Santa Barbara stack up in your list of schools? And did you think you were going to get in?
Honestly, I was very, very nervous about the college admission season. because I don't think my numbers were as competitive as some of the people I was talking to. And you're scrolling on Reddit and everyone has these super high numbers and getting rejected. So I just wanted to go to a UC. That was my main goal. And Santa Barbara was really high up there for a few reasons. One was that it has a really great engineering school and it has a small engineering program. So I'd say on my list, it was pretty high. I'd say maybe my third or fourth on a school that's like realistically that I could get into. So
yeah. And I remember when we first started working together, it was actually not even on your essays. It was just like, getting some stuff, in your background and your profile that you can actually write about. And that was wild. But I remember you taking on this crazy endeavor to build an electric onboard, from scratch, which ended up going 2x or 3x over budget or whatever with your team.
Yeah.
Tell us about that for a little bit. I mean, that was
of course.
Story.
Of course. So when me and Dan, when we were exploring, what I wanted to study, I realized I like building things. So me and a few friends decided to build an electric skateboard. And it sounds really simple because you're like, you have a motor, you have a battery, you connect it and you screw it onto a board and that's that. But it's actually a lot more complicated. And that's the thing about engineering. You think that something's going to be simple, but once you dive into the specifics of it, it turns out to be really complicated. So first we had to research all the materials we needed. Then we had to figure out how to get those materials to like be compatible with each other. And we ran into issues, we had to fix bugs, but at the end everything came together, and we were able to present the project at the San Mateo Maker Fair, which was just like all the hard work paid off because we were riding around this really cool electric skateboard around this like maker convention. So it was a really great experience, and it was like the engineering process. So it was fun and it was educational. So it was great.
And if I remember correctly, you guys got torn to shreds by like a UC Berkeley professor or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Super
not a UC. Yeah.
So
he was actually a UC Berkeley alumni engineer.
Okay.
And he was like, "Oh well, how are you guys gonna, you do this? What if this part fails? This part that?" So he was just very critical of the project.
Interesting.
But it made me upset at the time. But I realized that like all of that feedback is really important because as an engineer, you always have to improve your product. So that was a weird experience, but I think in the end, I'm glad that happened.
I'm super proud of you, man. For many reasons. I mean, one, you're going to a pretty awesome school, and we're about to get into like what it's actually like over there. Because I think you've had the unique opportunity of experiencing what it was like pre-COVID for like the fall, right? That everyone's looking forward to. And then, come March, April time, things went in lockdown. I mean, your world probably flipped on its head, right? But tell us, think back a little bit. So, go back to like maybe the summer, prior to starting at Santa Barbara. Tell us about the anticipation. What was it like,
a few things. That was the best summer of my life because it's just, you have no worries. You're just excited to go to college. But a little bit before that, I actually had more stress than I'd ever had before because I slacked off the second semester of my senior year. And I just wanted UCSB to get all my transcripts in, not rescind my admission. So those were the two things. But I was really excited, and one of the main reasons is because it was a new place for me. Growing up in Fremont, I think it's great, and I love Fremont as a city, but you don't really get exposed to a lot of aspects of the real world. It's just this like Silicon Valley tech bubble. So I was excited to go to a new place, and Santa Barbara, it's really different. You can't really compare it to Fremont. It's like this sleepy beach town with all these, super smart kids, and like kids that like to have fun too. It was just a great anticipation. And once I got to campus, that it all paid off. It was exactly like I thought it would be. There were kids surfing in the morning, studying in the afternoon, partying at night. So it's literally exactly what you expect.
Surfing in the morning, studying afternoing, partying at night. I mean, that sounds like the American dream, about as close as you can get to it.
Yeah, man. I mean, I wouldn't say that's everybody's life at UCSB.
Of course.
Actually, a vast majority of people don't even do that. But if that's what you want, and you can strike a balance, everything is here for you to take advantage of.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one thing I learned about SB. I mean, I've been SB now, I think it's been twice, and I think both times I stayed the night. Man, I mean, more so than any other UC, and I've spent my fair share of time at like Berkeley, LA, Irvine, everywhere, and it seems to me that Santa Barbara students are very, very sharp. And at the same time, they're also very, very like social. Like I've never seen quite the same balance. Like for instance, like if you go to like UCLA, right? Just like, not that far, but it's like you would imagine that, oh, it's like, it's next to the beach. These are also super sharp. But what's happened over the last like 5 to 7 years is, a lot of those kids who are like supposed to go to Berkeley, are now going to LA.
Right.
So if you talk to most people who go there, I mean, yeah, you can get the party if you want to, for sure. I mean, Beverly Hills and everything. But at the same time, it's like you also hear it's like viciously competitive. And like every time I talk to people at Santa Barbara, it was never viciously competitive. It was always like, no, I work hard. It's the quarter system. We got to work hard. We don't really got time for like, basically nonsense. But at the same time, like everyone's having a good time, right? I didn't feel like anybody I met was stressed out. Not at all, actually. And I talked to all kinds of students from like, obviously the students I was visiting, but also like just people, hanging out at the, the cafes or, just local, just general seating areas and stuff. And it just seemed like it had the right balance. I mean, did you kind of find that? And if so, like how, like how did that occur to you?
Right. I think a big part of that is the location of the school. It's hard to take anything so seriously when everything around you is so beautiful. Actually, my dorm last year, I had a partial view of the ocean and I could be at the beach in like 5 minutes.
Wow.
So if I was ever really stressed out, I would just like take a walk and that would really help. So that's one thing. Then the other thing is that, the reason that people go to UCSB is because they want balance. And that's something that I didn't really realize because for me, it was just like I had this Bay Area mindset ingrained, like you have to go to a UC engineering school. But a lot of the kids from across the country that are at UCSB say that, we like this school because it has both aspects. And, since it has both aspects, it attracts students that are well balanced. And I think that's sort of a pro because it's like cultivated a culture here where people aren't too stressed. They're really involved and they're really active, which is really great. And I absolutely love it.
It's funny you say location. If I'm not mistaken, Santa Barbara is the school with the toilet that faces the ocean. I'm not sure if you heard of that.
Yes.
Yes. And so as a challenge to anybody here who's considering Santa Barbara or someday perhaps visiting when this COVID thing is somewhat in check, the challenge is go find that toilet if you can. And by the way, I've actually been there. I know where it is. So
I've been there too, but I won't spoil it for
it was like I think it made it to like some website's list of like
it was a BuzzFeed.
Oh
yeah. Because it's in a building that faces the ocean.
Right.
And it's a newer building. And
surreal.
They just built it so that I guess it is. So
2 questions. One, on that note of toilets facing the building, or sorry, the ocean, I've been telling my students that I think you're going to love college because it is so much easier, right? There's just so less to worry about. You don't have to worry about building a resume or ECs or SATs or ACTs or subject tests or weighted coursework and AP count and yada, 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 yada. You just have to worry about living. And, if you just do your work and, stay on top of things, you'll get A's and B's, like no problem. If you put in a little bit more than that, like literally go into discussion and show up during office hours and stuff, you'll get A's, right? But past that, you have so much time in front of you, whether you want to find this toilet, this magical toilet, or you want to go hiking. There's tons of that in Santa Barbara, right? Or surfing. Like the world is really yours. I mean, have you found that or is that just me,
Dan, I think I agree with you to a certain extent, but I think I do have a disclaimer to give high school students because while a lot of kids in Fremont do have this really hard course load that prepares them well for college, if they do the same thing in college, if they study on a consistent basis, get their work done, you're right, they will get A's and B's. But the advice that I have for younger students is that there are a lot of distractions on campus that aren't there when you're at home, and those distractions aren't necessarily bad and they're important, but you have to learn to, do that in moderation, because your friends are literally living 100 feet within you. So if you don't know how to manage your time, I'd say you could get worse grades than you would in high school. But not because the content is necessarily harder. It's just that, there's so much cool stuff to do around that you neglect your studying to do that cool stuff. And that's something I would say, that don't fall into the trap of that and stay on top of your school.
That is so deep. So, I mean, I feel like I can have an entirely different conversation just on this, I mean, it's funny because like Mission San Jose, which I'm sure you're familiar with, right? Hyper competitive place. Like, we oftentimes hear about Mission kids like, oh, they're super successful. They have like 15 valedictorians, like they're getting into the best schools, yada, yada, yada. And then what we don't hear about is how many of those kids actually drop out their first year, right? Are they smart kids? Absolutely, right? They got to Berkeley, they got to LA, your Harvards of the world, right? But they get in and they think it's like, oh, I can just finally relax, and oh, there's a party. Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, there's this thing. Oh yeah, I'm gonna do that too. And what happens is they thought they were like locked in high school, and they're like, yeah, freedom, right? I can finally do whatever I want. And then all of a sudden, just things start tanking, and then there's this downward spiral. I've noticed, some students, the students who've encountered this, they kind of reach this point of no return. And if that happens, and I hope that doesn't happen to anybody who's listening to this, but you really got to be open about it. You got to go seek help from obviously the school. You got to be straight with the folks and your friends too, and recognize that, okay, probably cross the limit. Santa Barbara, I actually have a friend who very much what you just described, very much happened. And eventually the school ended up working with her kind of just to work it out. But it was a tough time for her as well as her parents. I mean, come on. It's like you got to the school that you really want to go to, and all of a sudden now it's like, oh, you might be on your way out because you partied too hard. But thanks for the disclaimer. The second question, really quick, before you dive into PIQs, is what's it like studying engineering at SB? A lot of people hear about like Berkeley engineering, Cal Poly slow, right? Probably don't hear too much about UC Santa Barbara engineering. I mean, what is that been like?
Actually, I think I have been pleasantly surprised by the engineering department at UCSB for a few reasons. And I think the biggest out of all of them is the small size of the engineering department. I think we have around 1,500 undergraduate engineering students, and UCSB as a school has 25,000 undergraduates. So it's like a very small sliver of the population. And we have a lot of resources available to that extremely small student body at the same price as the rest of the student body, which is like a huge pro. So if I ever want to talk to an advisor, my friends who are in letters and sciences have to make an appointment, weeks, I wouldn't say weeks, but a few days in advance. I can walk into the College of Engineering office at any time, and seek help. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I found that the faculty at UCSB is like extremely well reputed. And I think they do some really cool research. And I haven't had as much time, so I don't want to like go too deep into it because I don't want to say anything that's like untrue about the research here. But from what I know, and the professors that I've, had classes with, they're all doing cool research, and they're all from, really reputed universities. Just a few examples, just some name dropping. Our undergraduate vice dean of the College of Engineering, he actually used to study at Carnegie Mellon and then did his PhD at Harvard, and now he does research at UCSB. And another professor was at the University of Michigan, and now she's at UCSB. So it's just that you think that it's this, just this sleepy beach town, so they don't attract top faculty, but actually they do. And I was surprised at the quality of the faculty, how helpful they were, and how available they were for me to access. So those are the few things about UCSB engineering that I love.
Thanks for the insight. And gosh, I mean, whoever, I hope people are on this channel right now, because that's some serious insight. What basically Raj is saying, in case you guys don't hear it, is you can get kind of a private school-esque access inside at a public school price, overlooking the beach.
Yes.
If you want to.
That's pretty much what I'm saying.
I mean, that's pretty cool. Man, I mean, I can probably sit here and just talk to you about it for like
Yeah.
2, 3, 4 hours. But we have other stuff to cover. But man, thanks so far for just sharing your
Yeah.
perspective. And I'm sure you're gonna have more to share, come time. Let's dive into some of these PIQs. So let's help some of our students get to where you are, because we do have a lot of not just engineering students, but certainly other majors as well who are interested in UC Santa Barbara. And before I dive into this, it's really important to understand, guys, if you are a senior, you definitely want to reach out to UC Santa Barbara via email prior to the deadlines. Why? Is because they really, really are proactive with talking to students. And if you come across as someone who is very likely to, enroll upon being accepted, as opposed to going to Davis or Santa Cruz or Irvine or even Berkeley, there will be more inclined to take you. And so more on that probably in a future podcast, but you can also email us to find out more about how that works. But definitely get in contact with them. But let's dive into the PIQs that applies to all UCs. And I'm just going to go through them one by one and talk about, just like what's good, who should choose it, what to avoid, when you're looking at it, and also, what makes for a really strong response. So, Raj, I don't think you did this one, but I'll start with it. We'll dive into number 2, which I do think you did, so you can tell us about your experience with that. But number 1 has to do with a leadership experience. And guys, I really want to reiterate, it's not about listing all of your leadership work, right? It's about, the E word here is experience. And so it's singular. Common mistake I find a lot of students make is they start listing out leadership experiences, right? This is not about the breadth, guys. It's about the depth. And who should choose this prompt? I'd argue like anybody who's had a meaningful leadership role. That doesn't necessarily have to be a title. Okay, so like just because, you might have been the VP of a club or you were a co-founder of a nonprofit doesn't really mean you should write about it. Why is that? Because, well, a lot of students started those things or got those positions to look good for college. But in actuality, when it's like, okay, we'll write about it, a lot of students don't have a whole lot to write about. So what makes for a strong response to number 1 is if you had a really meaningful experience that was challenging. That's the key, right? Leadership, if you define the word, is basically persuading people to do something that they otherwise wouldn't have, right? Some off-top examples that I think are really strong this year, for instance, working with students is like, working with, team members who are just uncooperative, right? Working with team members who are friends, right? Who it's hard to put your foot down with authority when you're talking to your friends, or perhaps, stepping outside of your role, right? When you weren't the captain of a team and just a teammate to support a teammate who was perhaps being bullied by the captain of the team, right? These are all stories that are much more meaningful than saying, oh, I was the captain of a team or I was the president of a club and here's what I did. No, guys. It's about meaningful experiences that challenged you and that also taught you about what leadership itself means to you. And so never mind the titles. Those are nice if they fall into those stories, right? But you got to pay attention to the substance here. Is when were you really challenged in a leadership, role? And guys, don't forget, sometimes this means just being a really good family member, and I can say that because, well, one, I'm an older sibling, and that came with a lot of responsibilities, and that was certainly, demanded a lot of leadership skills. Talk about persuading people to do something that they otherwise wouldn't have. Yeah, well, having a little sister oftentimes involves that a lot. Yeah, Raj, I mean, what are your thoughts on this prompt? Do you have any thoughts or any, I don't know, have you seen any ones that were good or bad?
I couldn't agree with you more about the fact that like what you did is more important than the title of the position, because I can imagine there's like thousands of varsity captains or ASB presidents across the country, but what you did really matters in how you were a catalyst for change. So
yeah, for sure. So let's go on to number 2. Every person has a creative side and it can be expressed in many ways. Describe how you express your creative side. The funniest thing about this, the biggest mistake I see students make is they don't talk about the creative process. They just talk about what, like what did they do? What did they do? What did they do? And don't talk about how it was creative at all. So Raj, this is something that you wrote, right?
Mm-hmm.
Respond to. I mean, what did you write about and how did you write about it?
Right. So actually, this is what we were talking about a few minutes ago about the electric skateboard, and the way that I tied that into the prompt is that requires a lot of creativity, and the creative process is something that you need to make a product that is fun to use, for lack of a better word. So for my prompt, what I did is I talked about the design process. I took a class at the Academy of Art University in product design, and that really showed me like the way that people are able to create products. And there's a methodology to it. It's not like the phone in your hand was just someone sketched it once. It's multiple iterations over and over again to see what works. So that's kind of what I honed into in the essay. I talked about how building something is very challenging in its own way, but designing it properly in the first place before you buy any of the materials is going to save you time. It's going to create a better product, and it's going to be a product that you are. It's better thought through. It's not something that you just kind of made because those are the materials you ended up having. You really thought through what goes where, and how it serves a purpose. So I think the main thing in the prompt is just how I used the creative process and applied it to this engineering project. So yeah.
Couple of key ingredients there, and you mentioned one that I almost forgot, is details. Listen, just hearing what you're talking about right now, right? You're really diving into the details, and so that's kind of what I've seen as like the secret ingredients for this prompt is, the ones that make it really good, like 11, 10 out of 10 kind of thing. Those are the ones that went super into like the details, naming the color of the skateboard, of like all the parts that went wrong, and the creative process and all of it's like bad and good, right? Ups and downs rather, right? Not bad and good. It's all good. And so, but weak responses I've seen, or weaker ones, are ones that just said, oh well, I have played piano my whole life, and I at first I didn't like it, but then now I like it. And recently I performed at XYZ, and it's like that's cool and all, but one, you're not really answering the prompts.
Right.
Describe how you express your creative side, and it's like, how is that creative? It sounds more like a story of perseverance. And second one is like what are the details, right? Like what are the details that make that believable to me? And so yeah, I guess that alludes to, I guess, my main point of like, well, what makes this really strong? Details, one, two, really focus on the creative process, as you were talking about, because it's not the fact that you built something, right? Because if that was the case, then your essay wouldn't be longer than 2 sentences, if not one.
Right.
It's the process of building it, and also, by the way, breaking it and not working and failing and then trying again, right? And trying to breathe your creativity through this thing so that eventually it either works out or it doesn't. But it doesn't matter because that's how you express yourself. So yeah, and I think it's also really cool to note that you are an engineer, which is interesting because a lot of engineers and STEM majors tend to stay away from this, relative to the major. But you see how you wrote about pretty much your major, mechanical engineering, using this creative prompt, which I think is also pretty cool, man.
Yeah, that's one thing that I'd like to, like a disclaimer to high school students, is just because you're a STEM major doesn't mean you can't be creative. And I think that's a trap that a lot of kids fall into. They just think that, I'm STEM, I just have to solve these problems. But it's about creatively solving problems. And in a world, where we're automating everything, I think creativity is a really important skill in the workplace. And I think that colleges care that if you can show that even in a STEM field, I'm being creative. So I'd say if you're a STEM kid, don't shy away from this prompt.
That's a great point. Let's dive into the next one. Number 3, what would you say is your greatest talent or skill? Yeah. How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? First off, don't forget the second part of this prompt, because a lot of students do. They talk about what their greatest talent or skills, but they don't talk about how they developed it over time, right? They might give me one anecdote, but not give me the full timeline. Raj, I believe this is one you wrote too. What did you write?
Right. So I actually, mine was a little bit of a quirky response. I don't know. I don't know if that's the right word to describe it. But what I wrote about is I'm actually a left-handed, I play sports with my left hand, and I played water polo in high school. So I said my greatest talent, even though it's not really a talent, is me being left-handed, because I had a little bit of an advantage as a left-handed water polo player.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense, but for those of you that know water polo, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But just in general, if you're a left-handed athlete, it helps. So even though it wasn't really a talent, what I kind of talked about was how I built around this talent to make myself a better player, and that being an athlete with a chip on my shoulder, gave me the confidence to be better, even though I wasn't born with a talent. It was just a little slight advantage, and it was about it was a little bit of perseverance, a little bit of luck, a lot of hard work. So
yeah, and you're able to write about one of the most meaningful activities in school, right? Using
right.
that angle, which is really cool. No, this is awesome. I really appreciate the example, and I think on that note, it's important to know that the skill shouldn't be persevering. The skill, shouldn't be academic. The skill should be non-academic, and I think your response followed that to the T. Some additional points, to make it strong is really to show how you've applied it beyond just the skill or the thing itself, right? So, for instance, we have a lot of students who do write about sports, by the way, right? Whether it was volleyball, badminton, tennis, basketball, what have you. They typically talk about its greatness not in the technique, right? And by the way, if you're doing that, then you're doing this wrong. But they usually talk about the greatness in that the lessons that they learned.
Right.
That's the key, right? So, for instance, in your case, you were one of the few left-hand players. You also approached it with a chip on your shoulder, right? There were many parts to that. I think what you learned, the lessons you learned, is that it's okay if you're within the minority. It's okay to be different, right?
Right.
And I think that has permeated in various parts of your life. So that's the way you really end this out. I think number 3 was talk about your greatness, not in the skill per se, like the technical skill, but rather in its life lessons and its applications elsewhere, right? Beyond the sport or beyond the practice of the thing that you're primarily talking about in the essay. So that's what really makes it good. I think just remember, guys, stay away from this perseverance thing, because your greatest skill, I mean, even if it is persevering, don't write about it, because it's the most cliche topic you can possibly choose. And by the way, the wrong prompt, because prompt number 5, which is your describe your most significant challenge and how you overcame it, that's meant for that anyway. So another tip there. So next one, we'll move on to number 4. And this one is to do with basically, so this one's interesting because you have the option to write about 2 things. One, an educational opportunity or an educational barrier, right? So let me talk about when to utilize this. So if you had a really cool learning opportunity, whether that was a sport, because it doesn't have to be purely academic, or it was a summer program like Cosmos, ATDP, B-Bay, whatever it was, right? That was really transformative for you, then this is definitely a good fit for you, especially if that has to do with your major, right? Because you can really highlight a key anecdote. Students, by the way, pay attention. If you have research experience, this is definitely a good one to really highlight, since the UCs themselves are research institutions. But guys, remember, it's not limited to intellectual endeavors, right? They could also have been learning opportunities that were non-academic in nature, like sports or perhaps an internship or something else, right? For the barrier, I'd argue that's more circumstantial. So if you actually were from the background where family circumstances, economic circumstances, other kinds of extraordinary circumstances, or ones that were out of your control, heavily influenced your high school experience, make sure, if that's the case, then you actually overcame it. Because obviously, you don't want to write about how you had to deal with the circumstance without how you actually overcame it. Because if you look at the prompt, it's exactly what it says, which is how you work to overcome an educational barrier you faced, right? So, I'll just wrap it up on this one. What not to write about, I'd argue, is a hard teacher. Dropping to a D or an F in a class and then having to work really hard to come back. Guys, that's not a barrier. That's you just probably making a mistake or having not done, a good job in that class, or perhaps being surprised by an overly rigorous course load. Either way, that's not a barrier, right? So do not write about a school class related or rather grade related scenario, because I don't think that's the right fit here. By the way, I don't think that's the right fit for practically any UCPIQ, generally speaking. So there are a few exceptions, but that's generally the case. Raj, do you have any thoughts on this? I don't think you wrote this one, but do you have any thoughts on it?
No, pretty much everything that you said. I totally agree with don't talk about how you were slacking at the beginning of a class and then had to play catch
Yeah,
up. I think that
yeah.
didn't go very well.
We see quite a few of those, and that's
Yeah.
a good segue to the next one, prompt number 5, which is describe the most significant challenge you have faced and the steps you have taken to overcome them. Guys, if the most significant challenge you have faced is a B in a class, that speaks volumes to your privilege, to be quite honest with you, right? So specifically, UCs are looking for life challenges, so obstacles that were more life oriented as opposed to academic oriented. We know you guys work hard. We know you work hard to persevere past your B's and C's and perhaps sometimes your D's or F's. We don't want to hear about it here. We want to know about life circumstances or things that you had to overcome, beyond the classroom. That could be at a club, that could be a leadership scenario, that could be really anything, right? But it shouldn't be a grade. And that's pretty much it for this one. If it was personal, okay, fair enough. There are a couple of D's to avoid, right? Death, depression, drama, disease, right? We generally want to avoid those 4. I'll repeat that again. Death, depression, drama, disease, whether that was yours or somebody else's. Generally, we prefer to avoid those topics because they can be very heavy. Okay. Again, there are exceptions, right? But generally want to avoid those because those are what I call negative anchors, right? And they're really hard to get out from the negativity unless you have a really uplifting story. But outside of that, if you had a challenge that was just like pretty interesting, then this is probably where you run around it, but that's not a grade. And so I think we can fly past that. Number 6. So think about an academic subject that inspires you. This is definitely a cop-out for those who want to explain their major. So if you've brainstormed your PIQ topics and you're like, okay, I think I got them all lined up, look at them one more time and ask yourself, is your major explained anywhere? And if your major isn't explained anywhere, PIQ 6 has to be the easiest one to explain your major. Just make sure to talk about the timeline, right? And how basically you got exposed to it over time. What was the most recent and most meaningful exposure that you've had that has really confirmed that? And you want to ideally write about things that you are a topic that you're able to explore outside the classroom. That's why if you look at the prompt, it's both inside and outside the classroom, ideally. Otherwise, it's lackluster. It's like if the only thing you do is take AP course, self-study for an AP exam, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're, we're really inspired by this. Which leads me to the final thought: is make sure it was inspiring. Be specific, right? If the prompt says think about an academic subject that inspires you, don't tell me how you want to be a doctor. You're going off topic. That's a profession, not an academic subject, right? So academic subject, guys, stay on topic. Tell us the specifics about how it inspired you, and you should be good to go from there. We got 2 more left, and I think both of these, Raj, you answered. So let's dive into it. Number 7. Service. What have you done to make your school, your community a better place? Very popular one. What did you write?
Dan, I actually this ended up being, I think, either my favorite or second favorite essay that I wrote. And I might have written it maybe a week or 2 before the deadline. So it was definitely the most genuine essay that I wrote. And the reason that I wrote it so late is I wasn't sure if my service was worth writing about. It wasn't something huge. I wasn't like the Mother Teresa of whatever event I did. It was a very small thing. Yeah. But after talking to you and after talking to the others helping me with my essay, we decided it was a good story. So basically what I wrote about was in our high school, we had this thing called the Student Center. And it was the room where all of the ASB kids used to hang out. And as a freshman and a sophomore, it was a great place, for newer kids to come, meet older kids, get advice. It's just a cool place to hang out. And what started happening is that because of high school cliques and this and that, that student center, that ASB student center, became a very exclusive club. So what I talked about is, in my time as a member of the ASB leadership class, I was able, to enact change to make the center a more inclusive place. And the way I did that is just by leading small initiatives, and holding small events in the center. And the biggest thing that I tied into it is that when I was younger, I used to hang out in that center, and I received mentorship there. I made friends there. I have great memories in that room, and it just made me really sad that new freshmen couldn't have the same. And I did whatever I could in whatever little way that I could, to make sure that the room, lived up to its former glory in some way. So that's basically a gist of what I wrote about.
Awesome story, and for anybody out there who didn't have the same ammo that Raj brings to the table, what else can you write about? Well, I'm going to say concrete ways where you made a grassroots impact on your local community. So this doesn't mean to go to India and help with foster kids. This doesn't mean to, spend $8,000 to go to Mexico and build homes for the poor. This means your local community. And if you pay attention to the text, right, of the prompt, that's actually what they indicate to you, right? In fact, I think they even give you some for examples, right? Like family, school, city or something like that. So, and the reason why they ask you this question is because we want to know, what will you likely do if you were to come to our campus community, right? Whether I'm a UCLA or Berkeley or Irvine or Santa Barbara. And so here in your story, by the way, it's easy for a missions reader, right, to be like, wow, we have a student center here and it's probably being underutilized, right? Yeah. If I accept Raj, you'll probably make it overutilized, which would be great, right? So I think that's it. I mean, what not to write about, how you had, how you earned 200 hours of community service, and earn the presidential award. That doesn't matter, right? We want to know the impact of how you did your Eagle Scout project and built a bench at the local park. That's not adequately answering the prompt of how you made the community a better place. That might be an example of how you served your community, but it doesn't necessarily mean how you made your community a better place, right? And I think that's my final word on this one is you got to make sure you answer the prompt. How did you make your community a better place? If the answer is if you didn't, then it's okay. Move on. Look at the other prompts, I think it's all right. And the one final one, arguably my favorite prompt of the UC PIQs, is to some degree the most misunderstood and I guess you can say pretentious one, which is, what do you believe makes you stand out, right? Oftentimes students look at that and they think, oh my gosh, this is like bragging. How do I answer this? And so I'll start by saying this. One, Raj is the most humble dude I know. If Raj can write about it, anybody can. And I think, and I'll leave it at this, the secret is you don't worry about what makes you stand out. You worry about what makes you unique to you, what makes you true to you, right? And whatever value or characteristic that is, if that is true to you, and you have examples, that's the key, to back it up, right? Or perhaps even like a core activity that really backs it up, this is something that really, really could work for you, because not a lot of students utilize this prompt, I'll be honest. And so if you do have some good stuff here, you want to take advantage of that. But Raj, what did you write about? Tell us what you wrote about.
Yeah.
Why you ended up
actually, this prompt took me the longest time because I just wanted to make sure it was right, because it was an important story to me, and it was greater than just sending it to a UC application. It was about my life. So the first thing is that the message I wanted to get across is that I am a person that doesn't live for the approval of others. I am someone motivated intrinsically, and I was playing around with different ideas to do this, but I actually ended up deciding to talk about my culture, being a Sikh American, and how that's influenced, my worldview. So just like a quick summary of what I wrote about, I talked about, obviously minorities in this country face a great deal, of hardship, and I just talked about a small example of that in my own life. I sort of transitioned into some activities that I did that were cultural. So I was part of a Bhangra team, which is like a Punjabi folk dance. And whenever we used to perform, not everybody used to understand what the point of it was. And it made me really sad because I personally loved it. But I emphasized a sort of transition in my life when I became someone, that did Bhangra because of the applause, to someone that did Bhangra because I wanted to do it. I didn't care what anybody else thought. And, it's not necessarily, like this huge accomplishment or anything, but I thought it was an important part of who I was. And I thought it was like a personal hurdle. It was hard for me to not care about the opinions of others and do what I did. So yeah, that was what the essay was about. I just talked about my culture. I talked about Bhangra, and I talked about, living for yourself and not for others.
Well, that's inspiring just hearing you talk about it again.
Thanks. Thanks.
Yeah, it's like we should just work on your essays again. Just
I know.
No, you don't. You're like, nope, over. I'm in. Get me out of it.
Yeah. It's
Yeah. No, that was awesome. Man, honestly, I don't even feel like I should follow that up with anything because that was a mic drop in itself. So, first off, I just want to say thanks, man. Just thanks for joining us today. Just it's been an absolute privilege, just hearing your thoughts and your insights, seeing that you're healthy and good, still in Santa Barbara and not in Fremont, during these crazy times.
Yeah.
I think it's just been awesome, seeing you again. Like, how long has it been? I think it's been like
it's been like more than a year for sure.
Yeah, it's like a whole COVID and a presidential election later. It's like crazy.
But thank you so much for having me on. I had a great time, and I love sharing with younger high school kids because I was in the dark for a long time. So it's always great to share some advice.
Yeah, and look, it's anytime. Anytime. Maybe we'll catch up sometime semi-soonish once COVID is kind of back in order, and maybe you go back to just going back to normal days in school.
Right.
Good to have you on again. You could tell us what it's like after. Testing becomes more.
I would love that.
So yeah, I mean, for anybody who's still here, I mean, if you're still tuning in, definitely check out our blog. We actually post a lot about the things that we're talking about right now, in great detail. So if you feel like you missed anything or you want to follow up on something, feel free to check that out. Obviously, like, subscribe, leave some comments, or even some suggestions if you guys want to hear more about something else, or if you want Raj back on again in the podcast, go live. I wouldn't mind it at all. And next time, who knows? Maybe we'll be sipping on some Pete's coffee together when we don't have to, worry about Corona too much anymore. But Raj, thank you so much for your time, man. It was a true pleasure, and it's always an honor having you, man.
Thanks, Dan. I had a great time. So.
All right, guys. Well, for everyone.